Hi there. House of the Dragon Season two's scheduled week of filming in Caceres, Spain wrapped up this past Thursday. So this video is my final catch-all spy report on all the little bits and pieces that fell through the cracks, spy photos where we couldn't identify the actor or think we have, from Instagram actors who appear to have been in the city who might have been filming something. This is one big catch-all report for all the little stuff. I already made big videos on the food riot they filmed, a couple of other casting speculation things by name like Jane Aaron for something else, but these are small things that on their own couldn't sustain their own video. Or if it was like a 2-minute video on, oh, this is who we think that minor Kingsguard is, like no one would click on it, because unless you're a big book fan, people wouldn't recognize the name, so it made more sense for me to have one big catch-all video, and if you're one of my hardcore subscribers following the filming news, this is for you guys. And we'll be following up on this later. There's some really interesting bits on here, particularly some implications for how they're going to introduce Daeron and the other Hightowers. And what are they doing with the Kingsguard exactly? If they changed some things, like what is Harold Westerling doing? We don't know. So there's about half a dozen points in here. Let me run through them. I'm trying to do this as quickly as I can, because this is the last report. After this, I'm moving on to last on the set report. After this, I'm moving on to more general things about writers, directors, and behind-the-scenes crew working on Season 2 as a whole. And then, of course, we can tell they're gearing up to film a big battle scene at that castle set they're building in northern Wales. That's filming last week of June, and like just today, they put out a call for, movie industry does this a lot, put out a call for amputees willing to appear as extras who are, maimed in battle scenes. So it's not just, oh, it's a nice scenic castle, they're putting out calls for people to play injured people on the battlefield, and it's probably the Battle of Rook's Rest. Maybe redressed to also be the Battle of the Burning Mill, which is in the Riverlands, we don't know. But all the action stuff, in terms of war stuff, that's going to be in northern Wales. Spy people get out there. And by the way, in terms of scheduling, we know now from spy photos of things, and somehow people got photos of calendars, that filming will end the last week of September. Whereas I was hemming and hawing for maybe into early October, like their calendar says, it's marked through the last week of September. But because of the writer's strike, it seems like, combined with that new report by the interview with the new head of the drama department, Francesca Orsi, I'm going to make more videos about that, where she openly confirmed, we're going to come back and do the reshoots when the strike is over. That most TV shows inherently need rewrites and reshoots. It's part of the organic process. So the last month of filming is usually marked off on their calendar as not new sequences they haven't done before. They schedule in the last month is for filming scenes we wanted to redo. And I thought they'd film through that, but because you need the writing to do the reshoots, they can't do that. That's why it's ending so early. So in my earlier scheduled videos were all wrong. I said, oh, it'll go through October. You can't do the reshoots without the rewrites. So there's floating around in the schedule, there's that extra month to 6 weeks of filming that I don't care if they delay it. They can delay it as much as they want. What worried me is if they'd rush out a half-finished product. But they openly said in this big interview with Orsi that we're going to come back and do the reshoots when the strike is over, so we put out a quality product. So I don't know how that's going to affect the filming schedule, that there will be a return to filming later. I doubt that this would involve exterior filming, like the big battle things, but interior, mostly leaves in studio stuff, I think. That probably won't generate as much news, but in terms of, like you don't go, oh, let's do some rewrites on this giant battle scene. Like, the rewrites are usually smaller scenes anyway. But the big exterior stuff they can't hide from us, like food riots in Caceres or a giant battle scene in northern Wales, all of that will be done through last week of September. The next big thing they're doing immediately is Wales. They actually put out a letter about this to local businesses saying, we will be out of the way by July 14th. The actual battle will take 2 weeks to film, and by July 14th includes cleanup time. And it takes like a week to clean up the battle set. So think like, therefore, they're going to be filming last week of June, first week of July, and then by July 7th to July 14th is cleanup crew restoring everything they messed up on the battlefield. That is when the next big exterior spy photos are happening. Then again, that's just one battle thing. Like, they're going to be filming things in Portugal for Dragonstone as well. Who knows what other... Filming season 1, we just randomly found out, what are they doing in Surrey? And then we saw there's this giant royal hunt. So for all we know, there's some other part of England where they're going to be filming, like, Harrenhal and the Riverlands stuff. But that'll bubble up when it happens. It's not on our radar. Moving ahead, though, of just what's the schedule here, this is the last big spy report for the next month or so. Point 1, and this is actually really short after all that preamble, they cast Blood, of Blood and Cheese. It'll be actor Sam C. Wilson. That isn't really that impactful now because they've already cast Cheese, Mark Staubert, and we were just going over spy photos of the funeral in response to the Blood and Cheese assassination, so there's not much more I can say about that. They've cast Blood, they've cast Cheese, we've already seen spy photos of the fallout from it. We've seen the corpse. So that's in there. That's not even the focus. That happened like yesterday. That's not the focus of this catch-all video. Second and third points are kind of linked, though. Second thing is from cast photos on Instagram. It appears that Game of Thrones actor Eddie Ayer has been cast in House of the Dragon. He was in Spain with other people. Eddie Ayer was Gerald Hightower. In the flashbacks to the Tower of Joy with young Ned Stark, there was Arthur Dayne and Gerald Hightower as the Mad King's Kingsguard. There's supposed to be a third guy. Why they didn't include him, I don't know, but Gerald Hightower was there, and he's apparently coming back. We know this because he appeared in an Instagram photo in Spain with the actress who plays Rhaenyra's handmaid, Alinda Macy, and Michelle Bernard, who is the King's Landing brothel madam. You think, why is everyone friends with it? Actually, that brothel madam actress is a well-known acting coach. Like Ewan Mitchell said when he was filming the scenes talking to her in the King's Landing, she taught me, she was one of my major teachers, that she could be playing one of the noble women or something, just she ended up playing this brothel madam as like a cameo thing, I don't know, but a well-known acting coach, that's why everyone knows her and friends her on Instagram. So we know it's not just, I think he's following someone. There was a photo of him with cast members hanging out in Caceres. So he has probably joined the cast, but in what capacity? Not necessarily as a Hightower, I have to point out. You'd think probably a Hightower, but, like, Jefferson Hall plays the Lannister twins in this, but he was Hugh of the Vale in Game of Thrones Season 1. He was a random knight from the Vale. He wasn't even from the Westerlands. So, small world, there's only so many actors in England. He isn't necessarily coming back as a Hightower. But that leads into point 3, and this is the core of this video. There was this trio of actors we saw hanging out with the cast members. I'm not going to give you the blow-by-blow, but remember when I was posting, and if you're just going by my videos, I said, and here's the cast members taking selfies and posting Instagram photos from Caceres. There was Fia Saban, there was Freddie Fox, who plays Gwaine Hightower, is Alicent's brother, who before the time jump we saw played by some unidentified guy at the joust, because like 16 years later he's going to be played by an older actor post-time jump. So they've cast him as the new Gwaine Hightower, Alicent's brother, who's Helena's uncle, maternal uncle, and they were hanging out with other people. And we started going, who's this trio of actors they keep hanging out with? 2 white men, 1 black man. One of the white men is very tall. And then we went back through the spy photos as we do and went, they were on set and we saw them in costume. And we went, they're not like random King's Landing extras or peasants. They are well-dressed like noblemen. but we can't see any sigils on their clothing. That's usually, a dead giveaway when you got a nice heraldry right on their clothing. And because these were clear enough shots and people did image searches through databases, we found out the actors' names. I didn't do this, but the people I know. Shout out to Realm of the Dragon, House of the Dragon Croatia, and House the Dragon, that Brazilian channel from Twitter. They did a lot of work on this. That this trio of actors are Ralph Davis, the black actor is Tuck Steven, and Barney Fishwick is the very tall fellow. But we figured out, these are these actors that they're hanging out with. What are they doing? Are they playing like a guy who runs a tavern or something? Maybe there's the Rooster Inn in King's Landing or something where they're the proprietor. I don't know. But then went back to the spy photos and they're dressed very well as if they were noblemen. Not as Kingsguard, not as City Watch, and not just in Hightower uniforms per se, but that they looked important. And then just very recently, looking back at the better spy photos coming out, they are so prominent they are riding directly behind the royal carriage during the funeral procession. Well, behind the Kingsguard, there's actually two, don't want to get morbid, but there's two carriages. I used to say, the casket was at the front of the one Alicent and Helena are in. It's actually right ahead of them is the casket, drawn by a horse. Their carriage is right behind the casket drawn by a horse. Two separate carriages there. But immediately behind Alicent and Helena's carriage are the Kingsguard, forming a wall around them, so you can see above their shoulder Criston Cole. But then when you uncrop it to a wider shot, I cropped it to fit it in my photos, into my slides there. It's the carriage carrying Alicent and Helena. Right behind them is Criston and the Kingsguard. Then immediately behind Criston are this trio of guys. So they're not like background people. They are named actors who have careers. They're not just extras, and they appear reasonably prominently as nobles. Dressed like nobles. So now the question is, who are they? And just because you're a noble doesn't mean you're a big role. I mean, there was like the Lady of House Footley briefly had speaking lines when Otto was making everyone bend the knee in episode 9. Lord Caswell was a bit more of a character. He actually had speaking lines in episode, he showed up, he was in episode 6, then in episode 8, he was the only guy who greeted Rhaenyra, and then he was loyal to Rhaenyra and got killed off and hanged in episode 9. That was actually a recurring prominent role, Lord Caswell. I'm talking the low-level people like the Lady Footley, but speaking lines. As like a cameo for this was a bigger character in the book, but we're at least name-dropping them. So who are these people, and what's going on here, and how did they get there? That is the question. They don't have obvious heraldry. And the funeral is before the Crown Lands campaign. So these are not Lord Staunton or Lord Rosby or something. That happens later. That's the other parade we saw when they're parading the dragon head around, and they have the captured lords of Rook's Rest and Rosby there with their heraldry. We saw that separately. No, this is before that. So who could they be playing? They must be lords loyal to the Hightowers. They must be Greens. So are these lords from the Westerlands, Stormlands, and Southern Reach who just happened to be in King's Landing when this happened? Because there's a war starting. Travel is going to be limited now. In Season 1, we didn't really ask this because there's time skips between episodes, and they're at peace. We're going to have to start worrying about the issue of Littlefinger's jetpack, which the idiot recappers who aren't real TV critics laughed off of. Oh, ha, you nerds who don't care. We don't care about you're caring about travel time in the story for Littlefinger in Season 2. And then this is the mentality that leads to dragons zipping to the wall in a single hour in Season 7. That even the casual viewers started to know. How do you think it got this bad? This didn't happen overnight. It was a slide into people not caring and waving it aside. So there's this issue of how did they get there and where are they from? This ties back into point 3 with Eddie Iyer. Is he Ormond Hightower, the new head of House Hightower? Remember, Otto isn't the head of House Hightower. His older brother Hobart was. Hobart wasn't named in the books, but they gave him the name Hobart in the TV show. That's fine. We only saw Hobart before the 10-year time skip, actually. Last time we saw him was at the wedding, and he was kind of elderly. Maybe he died in the intervening 16 years. There have been 2 time skips since then, the 10-year one, then the 6-year one. Reasonably, that by this point in the books, he died off-screen just of old age. That when the war starts, the head of House Hightower is Hobart's son, Ormond, Otto's nephew. Because, Otto was the second son, so Ormond is the head, Otto is his uncle. Ormond has children, but they're boys who are just slightly too young to actually fight. They're like 13, 12. They don't really take part in the war. That they don't give us a full Hightower family tree. That there's Ormond, who's the head, and then Brynden Hightower is their most famous and most skilled knight, who's Ormond's right hand, who that they're riding together as part of the same army. So, tying all this together, and I know I've been rambling, some have proposed the theory, which just because I don't like it, doesn't mean they won't do it, so I have to acknowledge it. What if they introduce Daeron the Daring at Jaehaerys' funeral? And the more I think about this, I go, it's not a crazy idea, even though I'm not in love with it. That this is only the very start of the war, that the roads haven't been blocked yet, as it were. That, a small group of people can go along the highways relatively fast. And the war hasn't really begun yet. I like how In Deep Geek described this as, he's British. He compared it to the phony war at the beginning of World War II, also known as the Sitzkrieg. That it was September, Germany invades Poland. Germany didn't really expect England and France to declare war in response to that. They thought it'd be like the Munich Agreement. They thought they'd sit by again. That no, we can't keep letting this happen. It's just going to keep happening. They declared war, but then weren't really in much shape to do anything. Like France was in a defensive posture with the Maginot Line. We're not going to invade Germany past our defensive fortifications. So for the next couple of months through fall to spring, nothing really happened after Poland fell after 4 to 6 weeks. Because the Germans didn't expect a war, they thought they'd be able to take it. You don't launch a war in winter. So it was already like November. Poland had fallen. And it was a good 4 months. I'm doing this top of my head. 4 months until the spring campaign season could start. So for the next 4 months, they were just trading insults with each other through diplomats. So the British called it the phony war. The Germans called it Sitzkrieg, where we were at war was declared, but the armies weren't raised yet. We weren't in position yet. We weren't really doing anything. That we're sort of, the first 2 episodes were at that point, that the Blacks and the Greens were trading insults, and it's called the War of Quills and Ravens. That they're sending envoys like Luke to people to get allies. Jace is still off-screen going to the Vale and Winterfell to gain allies there. That actual battles haven't begun yet. So they're trying to figure out what to do. I mean, like the American Civil War, the real battles didn't start for like 2 years after secession was declared. Even the first Battle of Bull Run in 1861, that was nothing. Like, the real earnest field battles, they needed to gear up and get organized. Everyone was taken by surprise, so it took like over a year and a half for them to really get moving. So you could kind of fudge it that the war hasn't begun yet. That you could say Ormond and Daeron rushed from Old Town to King's Landing up the Rose Road, came to the funeral, but their army had been raising feudal levies, training up the foot soldiers, getting your horses and your cavalry in order, takes a couple of weeks to rally the bannermen. So they could, hang a lampshade on it in dialogue, have them go, we're still raising the levies and organizing them, it'll take a few more weeks, we need to head back to do that. We rushed to get here, as, 2 guys on horses. You could have them rush to King's Landing for the funeral for the sake of introducing Daeron and Ormond, with the rest of the extended Hightower family. Like, have Ormond in a scene with Otto. Have Daeron in a scene with his brothers and mother that he will never be in the same scene with them again for years. Then have them rush south down the Rose Road, come back to Old Town, and just at that minute, the northern half of the Reach rises for the Blacks. That House Caswell, they killed their lord, that the Caswells declare for Rhaenyra. Because it takes time to raise armies and declare war and block roads and things. Another possibility is that Daeron could get there on Dragonback, because it would take him a couple of days on Dragonback. Again, you can't zip around, but okay, like 4 days by dragon if you were hurrying. And maybe he rode Ormond on the back of his dragon. I doubt. I think they're going to say Ormond raced there on horseback as one guy, because small parties move faster. Possibly. Well, then the question rises, why didn't Tessari... It took them like almost a year for the Hightower army to get within striking distance of King's Landing, with Tessarion ridden by Daeron there. And Daeron could have flown ahead of the army really fast. He didn't want to. That he didn't want to abandon the Hightower army. He was shadowing them with his dragon. And they explains it in the book that he was slowly not advancing faster than his army was. He would fly ahead to scout out ambushes and traps, but he was sticking with the army just to provide air cover, literal air cover. He didn't want to do what Aemon did, where there's a point where he said, screw it, I'm going to burn out the Riverlands with Vhagar and abandon my field army. And Kristen Cole is like, what the hell? Your dragon was a deterrent against armies attacking us. And he didn't care. He was in such a rage. And that caused real problems. That just because you could strike somewhere within a day with your dragon, that, dude, you're our air cover. You can't leave us. So there's reasons why that would make sense to me. And this isn't Benny off on Weiss. That, okay, with a wink and a grin, because there wasn't screen time to introduce Daeron or Ormond in Season 1, maybe they could rush to King's Landing during the phony war phase. That, well, okay, Luke's death was said to be the end of the War of Ravens, but there aren't field armies really fighting yet. There's Harrenhal bloodlessly falls to Daemon. I could see them doing this, and I would accept with a wink and a grin. What are we going to do? Have the Daeron show in Old Town where not once do we see him with his main family? The way I would have done that is by doing it with flashbacks, and that is equally possible. Equally possible, and that takes much less time to explain. Maybe Daeron is in King's Landing, that actor Hodgetts, and that I just talked about in the other leak video, and maybe Eddie Iyer is Ormond, but they're both appearing in flashbacks that are set in King's Landing, just to have them have scenes with the other Hightowers. And they won't actually be racing around up and down the Rose Road and on Dragonback, but they're there to have scenes with the other Hightowers who are basically just in the King's Landing storyline. That is equally possible. In which case, bring this back to the trio. In my notes, I call them the trio because they're riding as a group. Maybe these are other Green Lords from the Reach, or something. Like Lord Redwine, or one of the Storm Lords, I don't know. But just as other Green supporters, other Bannermen who are named Bannermen. Why is one of them black? That's actually an interesting theory there, that if you look at a map, Old Town is closer to the Summer Isles than it is to King's Landing, and it openly says in the World of Ice and Fire, we've been heavily trading with them since ancient history. Like, before written history, Old Town has been doing brisk spice trading with the Summer Isles. That it's so where the Game of Thrones screwed this up, that in all of the major ports, even King's Landing, it isn't unusual to see, like, black people walking around. They go, oh, are you a Summer Islander merchant visiting our docks? Because there's, like, people from there every day here. Chitaya, who runs the high-end brothel, who they cut out, is a Summer Islander, that some of them, become merchants for other stuff there. Old Town is even closer to the Summer Isles than King's Landing, so there's sort of this theory that you would see a lot more Summer Islanders in their ports. So it stands to reason that maybe there could be, like, bastard noblemen who are like, oh, well, my mother was a Summer Islander ship captain. Oberyn Martell, one of his bastard daughters, and he's in Dorne. Sorella is half Summer Islander. So, like, this is headcanon that, like, in the Reach campaign, Tom Flowers is the bastard name of the Reach. Tom Flowers is commander for, like, the Caswells, and, well, he's on Team Rhaenyra and from the north, where they're not as much sea trade with the Summer Isles, but this has been a fan thing in the books, people saying you could, like, introduce, hi, I'm Reginald Flowers, I'm black, and I'm a Hightower younger cousin who's a bastard son of a Hightower and a Summer Islander woman. Like, that makes sense for that region. And for people saying, oh, Westeros.org didn't like that they changed the law, they didn't like that it was a cosmetic change. They then followed up Westeros.org and Linda and everyone openly saying, like, we thought it would be an interesting idea if you introduced, like, a Hightower bastard who was, like, black, because they trade with the Summer Islands all the time. What are you talking about? So that would be, even, like, Westeros.org would have been in favor of that. So maybe this Black Lord is, like, a red wine bastard, or a Hightower bastard from the Southern Reach, where they trade with the Summer Isles all the time. I don't know. Maybe he's a commander of a mercenary company who's really... I hate it when they go, oh, that character's just a mercenary commander. I'd like to be a captain of a sellsword army like the Golden Company. To me, captain of a private military contractor, the commander of a private army, sounds like a really respectable profession to me. In terms of, I know medieval history that there were organized organized mercenary companies, like in the constant wars between the Italian city-states, or like Othello or something. That, no, being a mercenary captain's actually quite the respectable position to me. So I don't know what they're doing with this. They could just be wealthy merchants that they're riding right behind the royal carriage at a funeral. These appear to be lords of note. One of them might be, I think Eddie might be Ormond. One of these might be Brynden Hightower. We don't know, but they seem to be Greens. So that was long, but that was the core point of this video, that there's all these new characters, and someone pointed out, maybe Daeron is there anyway, and there's really two options. Either they raced there early in the season, because this is like episode 3, before the real war has begun, that the Northern Reach hasn't rebelled yet. It'll rebel right after they get back to Old Town. And this was just a cheat, but okay, you got it, to have them have a scene together as one big family. Or they're there to film flashbacks with the other Hightowers like Alicent and Otto. That this is a flashback to when Daeron was still in the Red Keep or something. Either one is plausible enough, and I don't really have a problem with either one. Okay, you should have had him in Season 1. Whatever. But this will be an ongoing question with us of, are these Hightower commanders? Is Ormond Hightower going to be the guy that played Gerald Hightower? Is Daeron in this? I don't know. I'm sorry, again, I just wanted to ramble this off, as this is a collection of notes that didn't fit anywhere else. And that is the first part of the core part of this, is what's going on with all of those guys. Quick stuff now, the final points at the end. New Kingsguard.